Okay, so good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to start in just a minute or two to give time for everybody to get into the room. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so for those of you who are just coming in, welcome to the webinar, A Whole New World, Preparing for Life After Academia. We're going to wait just a few more seconds to make sure everybody gets into the room, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so my watch says it's time to get started. So for those of you who have just joined us and those who've been on for a few minutes, welcome to the webinar this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending on where you are. We're going to be talking about a whole new world, preparing for life after academia. This webinar is put together by the American Institute of Physics and the 4 societies that are sponsoring it. You see on the screen here, and we will start with our introduction.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Maloney, CEO of the American Institute of Physics. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar entitled A Whole New World, Preparing for Life After Academia. This webinar is sponsored by the American Institute of Physics, Physics Today, American Association of Physicists in Medicine, American Association of Physics Teachers, and the Society of Physics Students and Sigma Pi Sigma. Lisa Balbes from Balbes Consulting is our speaker. Lisa has over 25 years of experience as an independent consultant and has written for multiple industry publications, including Science Magazine. The presentation today will be followed by a brief question and answer period at the end. But without any further ado, I want to welcome the presenter, Lisa Balbes.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak to you and for spending a little bit of your Earth Day with me this afternoon. So we'll start with a few housekeeping things. Please remember that all attendees are in listen-only mode, so I will not be able to hear you if you speak. If you have questions, please submit them throughout the webinar using the Q&A function, not the chat window. You can use the chat for technical questions. If you need closed captioning, there should be a CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom window that you can use for that. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat feature as your first line of defense. And if that doesn't work, you see the email for Vanessa Bridges, who will be more than happy to help you with those issues. Please do also remember that today's webinar is being recorded and you will be emailed a link to that recording at a later date so you can watch it over again at your leisure. So once again, thank you for joining us, and let's move on to the content of the webinar. Okay, so we're going to talk today about transitioning from academia to industry, figuring out where you want to go and how to get there. So we're going to talk about 3 main sections. We're going to start with your favorite topic, talking about yourself. Where are you in your career right now? What knowledge and skills do you have to sell to a potential employer? What do you have that you want to use in the next part of your career? And something that a lot of scientists don't think about, what are your values? What is important to you? So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll then talk about the next step, figuring out where you want to go. What are the options? How do you figure out what they are, what you want to do, and how you get there? And then finally, mapping it out, doing a gap analysis, figuring out what you're missing in order to get to where you want to go, and setting up a timeline and deadlines and really some things to make yourself accountable to yourself so that you will get to where you need to go. Okay. All right, so let's start by talking about your favorite topic, yourself. Some of the things that you want to think about when you're looking at the next step in your career is, where am I now? What do I have that I've learned so far that can be useful for me in the next steps? So knowledge is the first thing that people think about. What kinds of things do you know? What kinds of things have you learned in your education or learned how to do that will be valuable to someone else? What skills do you have? What physical skills have you done in your career that someone else might be willing to pay you for? And a great way to start identifying some of these and finding out what they are is by thinking about, what are your accomplishments? What are the things that you've done so far that you're most proud of? And then what did you have to do in order to make those things happen? So let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Okay, you start by thinking about knowledge. So what areas of knowledge do you have? Oh, excuse me, what specialized expertise do you have that other people might not have and might be willing to pay you for? So technical knowledge is the first thing that scientists always think about. So maybe you know something about material science, you know about magnetics, optics, you know how to do ab initio calculations. Writing down these technical skills and technical areas of knowledge is the first place to start. And that's usually the easiest. You want to think about what you know specifically, but also generalize it a little bit so that it will be more applicable to more different areas. Because the odds of someone hiring you to do exactly what you did in your grad school or your undergrad research is pretty small, but if you can generalize it just a little bit. So yes, I did these studies on steroids, but maybe they're also applicable to natural products. Makes it a little bit more generally usable. Think about also things that you know how to do that other people aren't going to know. You may think, oh, well, this is easy. Everybody knows how to use Excel. Everybody knows how to, write JavaScript. That's not necessarily true. Just because everybody in your lab knows how to do that, or everybody that you talk to, not everybody knows how to do that. You're kind of living in academia. It's a little bit of an insulated world, and everybody there knows a lot of the same things, but out in the rest of the world, it's a little bit different. You also want to think about your non-technical skills. So again, things that you've picked up along the way, but may not be those specific scientific skills that you thought about. So maybe you know how to do agile programming. You probably know how to design systems and test them. You certainly know how to use the scientific method. If you're a scientist, you're probably very good at dealing with failure and figuring out, I wonder why that didn't work. Let's try this. Let's try that. Scientists are really good at that. You're probably really good at learning how to learn. So think about some of these other, what we would call soft skills or non-technical skills and areas of knowledge that you've learned throughout your career. Okay, and then start thinking about, again, skills. And these are usually physical skills, but they can also be more cerebral skills. So maybe you know how to troubleshoot vacuum systems to make sure that they work really well. Maybe you're an expert at statistical calculations or analytics. So start, again, going back through your career and thinking about all the things that you've done, all the different skills that you've acquired. Maybe some of them you did and you're like, I don't like that. I never want to do that again. That's fine, but you know that. So at least write that down on your list as something that you know that you have expertise in, that you can talk about, even if it's something that you've learned. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't want to do that again. Okay. Some more of the softer skills that you might have: technical writing. We all have experience in writing different documents, but is your specific expertise or things that you do really well, that you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy explaining scientific information to other scientists, or do you enjoy explaining it to non-scientists? Do you prefer spontaneous presentations or planned presentations? So think about the details of which parts do you like and which parts are you really good at. Okay, so if you say, well, I've done a few things, but not a whole lot, a great thing to do is go back, think over your career, and ask yourself, what are your most significant accomplishments? What are the things that you've done so far in your career that you're most proud of? What are the things that your parents brag about that you did? Um, those are the things that you're really good at. And so look at those accomplishments and say, okay, in order to make that happen, here's what I had to do. Here's the skills that I had to use. Here's what I really enjoyed. And if you start writing all these accomplishments down, you'll start over time, you'll get a pretty significant list. You're not going to be able to do all this right away. It's going to take some time, but start thinking about what are you really proud of that you've been able to accomplish so far in your career? What are the things that other people come to you and ask for help with? Those are probably things that you're good at. So think of one of your accomplishments, write it down. This is what I did. I was a member of a multi-university team to do analysis of a certain thing. This is what I did. This is what other people on the team did. You're going to need this information for your resume anyway, but start writing it down. It will sound better and you will use it later on. You can then take those accomplishments and start converting them to skills. So as part of that accomplishment, you designed and constructed a new instrumentation to measure something. And you can see these bulleted lists, these examples that I have here would be great items to start putting on a resume. These are things that I've done. You see, we've quantitated them a little bit to tell us what you've done. So you can really start putting together a resume and saying, look, I've done all these things. This is what I'm able to do for a potential employer, and maybe I can put them together in a different way or find something that's going to fit. Okay, so if you can start, coming up with this list of your most significant accomplishments, come up with 10 or 12 of them, start listing the skills, and then take that list and start categorizing them. On your resume, they're going to be listed, under each position. They're going to be listed reverse chronologically. But for this self-reflection exercise, start grouping them and say, you know what? In every single accomplishment that I was really proud of, I was always the one writing the report, or I was always the one that was getting the team together, or gosh, every project that I'm really proud of, I always was doing these kinds of things. And it will, in a lot of cases, it will jump out at you. You know what? This is what I really liked about all these. This is what I was really good at. So this is, again, this is not something that you're going to do overnight. It's going to take some time, take some self-reflection, but you should be able to start identifying, you know what? These are the things that I'm really good at. These are the things that I really enjoy doing. And these are the things that I want to do in the next step of my career. So knowing yourself, knowing what you have to offer and what you want to do is going to be really important in figuring out where you want to go next. And it is going to take some time and some self-reflection. Okay. So in addition to knowing what you can do, what your skills are, what your knowledge is, you also want to think about your values. What is important to you? What motivates you? What makes you get up in the morning and want to go to work? There's a huge number of values out there. So you can, go online to your favorite search engine, look up personal values. You can find all kinds of lists of them. They're all important, and they're pretty much all important to everybody, but the relative importance is going to be different. What's important to you at this particular stage of your career is going to be different from what might be important to you 5 or 10 years in the future. So you need to know what is most important to you now, and what you can live without. They're going to be different for different people, so there's no right or wrong answers. It's what's important to you. Okay, so let's talk about some of the specific values that might be important to you and how this might affect your career. Okay, autonomy is one that's important to a lot of people. So how important is it to you that you have an autonomous position where you have the freedom to be self-directed? You get to decide what you're going to work on or how you're going to do it. Does that matter to you? Or do you actually not like that and you'd rather somebody else was telling you what to do? What about perfection? Are you a perfectionist? Do you think it's really important to do everything exactly right, get every I dotted and every T crossed, no matter how long it takes? Or are you somebody who says, well, 80% is good enough, and then we move on to the next thing? Okay, and you can kind of start thinking, yeah, there are some jobs where it's really important to get every I dotted and every T crossed. Think like regulatory quality assurance. There's other jobs where, you have to get it good enough and then move on to the next thing because it's time sensitive. Okay, what about security? How important is security to you? So is it important to you that you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks or every month? You're going to have this position 6 months or a year from now? Or are you not worried about it? And if I lose this job, I can always get another one. Okay. Altruism. This is something that, it's usually important to everybody. They want to make the world a better place. They want to feel like they're helping others. Some people think it's really important to get this from their work. That's what matters to them. My work has to be making the world a better place. Other people, their work is just a place to go, but they spend their spare time volunteering to work for children, volunteering to work with the environment, so they get their altruistic needs met outside of work. What kinds of things, are important to you in this respect? Creativity is another thing that a lot of people value. So is it important to you that you get to be creative in your work and invent new things or new ways of doing things? Okay, we have a few more on the next slide. Challenge. A lot of scientists really like challenge and solving difficult problems that no one has ever been able to solve before. Is that important to you, that your work is challenging? Some people like recognition. So awards, honors, promotions, those external signs of recognition are important to some people, and that's what motivates them. They really like to earn awards. So is that important to you? Is that one of your top values? Okay. Balance is probably the one that changes the most over the course of your career. So generally earlier in your career, when you're single, you don't have children, you don't have a lot of other responsibilities, balance isn't quite so important. As you get older, you get more responsibilities, balance becomes more important. Being able to have time for work and personal, being able to come in early, leave late, being able to work from home sometimes, which, gosh, we're doing a lot of these days. Okay, so how important is balance to you in this particular stage of your career? Growth. How important is it to you that you get to learn new things, maybe be the first person to know some particular new piece of information that you've discovered? Collaboration. Are you a person who likes to work with other people? So you like to work on all group projects? Or are you happier when you get your piece of the project and you get to go off and work by yourself and other people leave you alone? Okay, so again, there's all kinds of different values. As I said, if you go search online with your favorite search engine, you'll find all kinds of lists, and start kind of ranking them. This is really important to me. I really need to get this from my job. You know what? This I don't care about so much right now. This I get met elsewhere. Okay, so let's look at some particular jobs and see how these values might play into that. So our favorite job, university professor. This is the one that everyone's familiar with because we all came up through the academic system. So if you think about a university professor, what values might be important to someone who chooses this career path? So what things would be really work with that particular career path? Okay, security is one that people usually mention, especially after tenure. University professor is a very secure position. Once you have tenure, you're not going to be let go. Autonomy. If you're a university professor, you're bringing in your own research funding, you get to decide what kind of research you do. So you're really running your own little area there. Okay. What might be a bad thing for a university professor, or I guess not as important thing for a university professor? Okay, one of them would be advancement. As a university professor, you're assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, you're done. There's not a huge job ladder and lots of titles that you're going to get changed to. So if it's really important to you to get promotions, not a lot of ways to do that in this job. Okay, mechanical testing analyst. This is another one that I took from one of your job boards. Okay, so you can kind of see what this person is is doing in the job description here. Okay. So the person who was taking this job, I would hope that this was someone who had a little tending towards perfectionism, because they're going to be testing equipment and making sure that it meets specifications. So I want to make sure that they're doing that right and testing that equipment very carefully. Hopefully it's going to be somebody who's very detail oriented, and maybe somebody who likes a challenge, because they're going to be designing new tests. So that could be very challenging to come up with tests that would identify hidden defects. Okay. And then one more example, for somebody where security was their most important value. That was the most important thing to them, was knowing that they were going to have this job in 6 months, have it in a year. Traditionally, the federal government is a very secure place to work. It's a little bit difficult to get in, but once you're in, it's a very secure place to be there. We've talked about university professor after tenure. Some other things that people don't think about: working in a national lab, working as a contractor for the federal government, not a direct employee, can also be a very secure position. Entrepreneurship or self-employment, it's debatable whether that's very secure or not secure at all. And we can have that discussion at another time. It's certainly, setting up your own company, you get to make all the decisions, and it can be secure if the company goes, but also a lot of companies fail. Okay, so you can see there's lots of things to think about, not just, what specific tasks do I want to do at my next job, but what do I know? What do I have to sell? What's important to me? What's really going to make me happy in this next position? Okay, so once you've started thinking about yourself, and like I said, this is not something you're going to do overnight. It's going to take some time to think about these things. While you're doing that, you can start researching, where can you go? What are the options? What does it look like out there in the world of work? And what does it look like now? Obviously, the world is very different now than it was a year ago. It's also very different now than it was 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. So especially when you're getting advice from other people, make sure you're getting, information about what the job market is like now. Okay, so what are some things that you can do? You want to research all the possible destinations. I guarantee there are more jobs out there that you've never heard of than there are that you have heard of. I've been looking into non-traditional careers for scientists for, oh my gosh, I hate to admit it, but 25 years. And I still talk to people and say, really? That's a job? And sometimes I say, that's so cool. How did you get into that? What did you do? Tell me more about it. That's really interesting. And other times I'm like, really? Oh, I'm so glad you do that, so I don't have to. But there's so many things out there that you can do. The more you know, the better educated you are, the better you'll be able to find the one that's right for you. Okay, so start thinking about, what is it that you actually need? Okay, there are needs and there are wants. So start by thinking about, what is it that you need? Do you need to be in a specific geographic location? Maybe you have a partner who has a position and they're not going to move. What are your main values that you need to get met? Is there a particular sector that you want to be in for a particular reason that's really important to you? Is there a particular salary that you need to have? So really, what are your needs? Okay, the number of needs that you get met is going to depend on the job market. So the tighter the job market is, the fewer jobs, the fewer things you get to pick. When the job market is really tight, I will tell people I work with, yeah, you get to pick one thing that you can be fussy about, and everything else has to be flexible. When the job market is not so tight, maybe you can pick 2 or 3 things that you have to have and then be flexible on the rest. Okay, so the things that you decide that you don't need, but kind of that next level, would be your wants. So maybe, I want to work in this industry, but I'm open to other options if that's possible. Maybe geography. Yeah, I'd like to live in this part of the country, but it's not such a big deal. Maybe there are certain tasks that you do or don't want to have as part of your job. So start thinking about, all of these things. What do I really need? And what do I really, what is just kind of a want? And you can start ranking them. Okay, so again, it's just like your values, it's going to be a hierarchy. Well, these are more important. these are less important. These are just, what is nice to have. Okay. And if you can, for those of you who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all you really need is food, clothing, and shelter. Hopefully you're going to be able to get a little bit more from that, from your job. Okay. And then you're going to start researching, where can I go? And you guys have some wonderful resources out there. So each one of the societies that is participating in this organization, in this webinar, has a job board, and there's lots of fabulous information on all of these. So I would highly encourage you to check these out, look at all the information, study it, learn as much as you can. So we're going to go through some specific examples of some of the information that you can find on these websites and then on other websites that are out there. The web is a wonderful tool for finding out, what are the possible destinations? What are all the places that I could go? Okay, so some of the things that you want to start looking at are, where do people like me go? Where are things that I could try to do? And I've put the URLs down in the corner for each of these. So you'll be able to go to those directly later on. Okay, but this is a great diagram that shows you where new physics PhDs go. And this was for about 5 years worth of data. And look at all the different places they go. Part of the problem with keeping track of these statistics is that people get spread out, and it's hard to go, well, where do I go for all the people who, used to be in this particular field? And they're all over the place. So just because you want to, leave academia and go try something else, there's lots of people who've done that. You're not alone. So go look at where all these people have been hired. And those are all possibilities for you. Look at the actual employers. These are all the companies who have hired new PhDs. Probably they hire bachelor's people as well. And I'm guessing you probably haven't heard of a lot of these companies. And you can see this is just A through D. So there's a whole rest of the alphabet as well. So start looking up some of these companies. Well, what do these companies do? What do you think they hire people to do? Am I interested in doing that? I didn't even know that was a job. So this is a great place to start conducting some research and to see what the possibilities are that are out there. Go look at their website, go look at their open positions, and start looking at some of the job titles. See, well, what are they hiring people to do? This is, again, just a sampling of the job titles that are out there. Some of these are cool. I mean, seismic imager, what a cool job title. I have no idea what that person does, but it's a cool job title. Some of them are much more generic, associate engineer. Well, that doesn't really tell me anything, but go read the job descriptions and find out what these people do. Okay, so the more you read, the more you'll find out what people in industry actually do. And you'll start saying, oh, this one sounds really cool. Oh, that one maybe not so much. And you'll start identifying what it is, really resonates with you. Okay, there's lots of statistics out there as well. Okay, so the statistics can help you feel like you're not alone. This is not a new problem. People have been getting degrees in the sciences and then wanting to go and going into non-traditional careers for years. The oldest publication I have on this topic is, I think, from 1953, talking about all the careers that were out there for scientists. Oops, I apologize. So there's all kinds of things out there. And if you look, the majority of the people actually do go into industry. It's just that you don't see them because you've been in academia. So they're out there. And most of them are out there and be willing to talk to you about their jobs. Most of them love their jobs. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can find these people and talk to them and find out what's out there. You can also find information about salaries out there. So this will come in handy when you go to negotiate, but it can also tell you how valued these people are. Okay, I know everybody's always interested in how much do the different jobs make. I also found some interesting information on some of these websites about what are the skills that you need for these different positions. Okay, so what are the interpersonal skills? What are the managerial skills? So you can start looking at some of these and thinking about, well, gosh, did I get these? Do I have these skills, or is this something maybe that I want to get some experience in while I'm still in school? So what can I do now that's going to set me up for success later on in my career? Okay. And if you look, most of these are probably skills that you're getting during your education. And some recent articles that have actually been published on this topic show that graduate students, especially and postdocs, are much more prepared than they think they are for industry. They have a lot of the skills, they just don't always recognize that they have them. Okay. So I've said a lot about, reading the job descriptions, finding out what the people in industry really do. So use these tools, find their lists of open positions that are going to be appropriate for somebody like you. Set up a recurring search so that you're going to get an email, once a week or once every couple of weeks that will list all the open positions that match your description. And then watch those over time, and you'll start seeing, well, gosh, I'm seeing more and more positions that are looking for this, or I'm seeing fewer positions that are looking for that, or I'm seeing positions that are starting to ask for this other skill that I don't really have yet, but maybe I should find out what that is and get some experience with that. I also found when I was doing searches that using partial words, I got much better results. So like physic seemed to be a good keyword for doing some of these searches. So play around with those keywords until you start getting a reasonable number of hits that you can look at every week and just keep up on how the job market is changing. In addition to your professional society, there are other places that you can go look. So you can obviously look at company websites. I showed you earlier, lists of companies. So look at their websites, look at what they have open. If you're interested in government positions, all of those have to be listed at usajobs.gov, except the ones that don't. But the vast majority of the government positions will be listed there. Indeed.com is probably still the best aggregator. So it actually goes out and searches a bunch of the other search engines and then returns all those results. So that can be a good one. Glassdoor is useful. It's very interesting because it's all self-reported data. So you have to be a little bit careful with what you see there. And there are openings on LinkedIn. It's really optimized, not so much for job seekers, but for the recruiters. So people have not had a lot of success there, but it's certainly someplace that you can go look. So there's lots of places that you can go look and start reading about open positions and finding ones that you think are interesting or ones that you think are not. And then take that job description. Again, the job title may be cool, but job titles are really meaningless. You really want to look at what they're doing and start pulling out all the information that you can. So start pulling out the keywords. What is this person going to do? So in this job, I'm going to be developing new methods. I'm going to be developing manufacturable instruments, developing new techniques. So these are the things that I would do in this position. Are these things that I like to do, that I know how to do? Okay, yeah, then I'm going to start putting some of these keywords in my resume if I've decided I'm going to apply for this position. Okay. What kind of a person are they looking for? This particular one, they're looking for somebody who's confident, capable, somebody who's going to be building relationships. So I'm getting the sense that this is going to be a long-term position. They want somebody who's going to be able to travel to trade shows and conferences. Is that something that you're going to want to do? And then look for, again, what other characteristics are they going to want in this particular person? So person who's doing this job is going to offer their insights on design. They're going to be a driver. They're going to be talking with other people about the feasibility of projects. So it looks like if I'm interested in this position, I'm going to be able to have to stand up for my own opinions and defend my opinions to other people. Is that something that I want to do? Is that something that I'm excited about? So there's really a lot of information in these job descriptions, and you want to start pulling that out and figuring out, yeah, I like this. I don't like that. Your ideal job is out there, something that you're going to be really excited about, and it's just a matter of finding it. Okay. So once you started identifying some of these things, finding the kinds of positions that you're really interested in, that you want to apply for, or that you want to look at long term, what's the next step? You found some of these possible destinations. So now you have to map out your route. How are you going to get from where you are now to where you want to go? So you would do what we call a gap analysis. So here's what I have. Here's what they want. How can I make those two things match up? So maybe you have several of the things that they want. So these first three, it's like, yep, I've done that. Some of them, it may be a matter of learning the language. Say, yeah, I've done lots of 3D printing. In industry, that's actually called additive manufacturing. So just by changing the terminology, learning the terminology of that field and using that terminology, you make yourself fit. And then there may be something that you're like, you know what? They want GMP. I have no idea what GMP is. I haven't heard of that. The good news is, again, you've got the internet, you've got the research skills. Go find out what that is, learn about it. Maybe it's something that you're going to have to, get some education in or try to get some experience in that particular topic. But find out, what's missing. What do I need in order to be qualified for this position? And then find a way to get it. And then start using what you've learned. Start using some of those keywords in new searches. So go find more companies and more information until you zero in on what's perfect for you. You can use NAICS codes. This is a 6-digit code that's assigned to a company that tells you what kind of work they do. And so you can use those to identify other companies that do the same kind of work. Save your searches, follow them over time, follow the industry, and you'll, again, start identifying things that are perfect for you. If there are things that you're missing, again, skills that you don't have that seem to show up over and over again in the jobs that you like, find a way to get experience in that. So take a class, earn a certificate, find a volunteer job that lets you manage a budget or whatever else is needed. Okay. You can apply for a job if you match about 80% of what they're looking for, but obviously more is better. And then set yourself a timeline. So start with, well, when do I have to have this job, and work your way backwards. So what do I need to start doing now? We generally say you want to start this process a year to 18 months before graduation or before you're going to need that new position. But obviously sooner is always better. So work backwards, give yourself and set yourself some deadlines. And then again, while you're doing this, you want to be developing your professional network. So in addition to finding out what the jobs are, you want to find out who the people are out there and talk to people about their jobs, about their companies, about their careers, what they like, what they don't like. You'll be able to learn lots of things that are not published on the internet, find lots of opportunities before they show up online, and look for ways to help other people. There's lots of things you can do, lots of information you can provide that's going to help other people, which will come in handy later on when you want to ask them to help you. Okay, the best way to build up your network, or at least to keep track of it, is set up a professional profile on LinkedIn. This is where industry is going to go when they're looking for somebody. So you want to make sure that you have a professional profile there, that you're connected to lots of people. And that you really know these people. It's not just names, but people that you could call up and ask for a favor and they would do it. Join discussion groups, follow companies. Again, gather all the information that you can. There's lots of resources out there, so take advantage of them. And then use your network. LinkedIn is the only tool I know of that searches not only your connections, but it searches your connections. So I had an incident recently where I had a company call me, ask me about doing a project. I'd never heard of the company, but I was able to use LinkedIn to find somebody I knew who knew somebody who worked at that company and was able to give me lots of great inside information that I would not have gotten any other way. Okay, but you have to have that network set up ahead of time so that you can ask people for information about different things before you need it. Okay, so everybody agrees that career planning is important, and we all know that we should do it, but it's never urgent. It's always, well, I can do it today or I can do it tomorrow. It's not a big deal. What you want to do is find ways to move this from not urgent to urgent. So break your, as I said, set up a timeline, give yourself deadlines by when you're going to have things done and try to hold yourself to those deadlines. Find an accountability partner, someone else who's maybe going through this process that you're going to check in with every week. Okay, what'd you do this week? Oh, okay, what'd you do this week? So really find ways that you can move this and realize that, it really is urgent. You really do need to do a little bit of this every day, and that will build up over time to where you find what you want, where you want to go. And then you can go there. Okay, so you get ready, you find where you want to go, and you set yourself up and go there. And you can do all kinds of different things. These are all people who got degrees in the sciences and then became famous for doing lots of very different things. So an education in the sciences prepares you for anything. You can even be Pope. Okay, but you do have to put in the time that is required to do your homework and find out what you want to do and prepare yourself for that career. So with that, we've come to the end of the formal presentation. Liam is going to come on and I will let them introduce themselves and they'll talk about the next webinar, and then we have time for some questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liam Conlon. I'm with the AIP Career Network. We just wanted to touch on right before the Q&A that the registration for the May 18th webinar is now open. You'll see the title is If You Lead, Will They Follow? Leadership Skills, a Critical Tool for Career Success. So I just put the link in the chat. So if you'd like to register for that, you can do so right now. And then I think you can move to the next slide, Lisa.
Okay.
So we are in the Q&A portion, and let me just.
And I know we had some questions come in, and I'm hoping you had time to actually read them.
Yeah, no, so I've organized a couple of them. Let me just highlight us both, or spotlight us both.
Okay. Good. I'm sure everybody's tired of looking at me, so they can look at you for a while.
Great. So some great questions came in. I think for the first one that we should go through is a question that goes, how do you overcome the degree prerequisite hurdle? Regardless of skill and knowledge, many jobs require online applications and automatically disregard skilled applicants. For example, even going to a laboratory in person, they're just told to apply online. Do you have any, insight about that?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. Pretty much, most of the companies want you to apply online because they're going to use an applicant tracking system, and it's easier for them to do things that way. We're seeing a little bit less where they actually, degrees are not required. I would say required as much as they used to be. They are more, if you've got the right skills and got the right words, I think, that's just as important as actually having the appropriate degree. There are some things you can do if it says, do you have this degree, and you don't have it yet because you haven't graduated. You pretty much have to say, yes, I have the degree when you apply, but then you have to send an email to HR and say, while I do not have the degree now, I anticipate graduating on this date, so I will have it by the time I start. But as long as you have, sort of a degree, they're more going to be looking at the skills. And especially if you've been able to contact somebody at the company, a lot of times they will say, yeah, we just want you to have the skills. We don't care if you have the specific degree that we want. And to some extent, that depends on how tight the job market is. They get more flexible when it's harder to find people.
Great question. One thing I did want to touch on, folks, at the end of the webinar, in your web browser, you will be directed to a survey about this program. We highly recommend you leave some feedback. The whole reason why we put these webinars on is to give you information that you're looking for. We have the next webinar scheduled for May 18th, but we're always looking for new subjects or more desired subject matter that you're interested in. So if you see something and you thought, I want this subject covered, just let us know in that survey. That's the best way that we can bring you more webinars with the subjects that you want covered. So for our next question, we have someone who currently shifting their career from engineering to astronomy. This came up regarding during your conversation about developing skills. They ask, should we also work on or develop skills that are useful in both academia and industry? Or do you think focusing on one would make more sense?
I think there are very few skills that are only applicable in one or the other. So I think, any skills that you develop are going to be useful in a variety of circumstances. What I've really found interesting is a lot of times it's the same skill, it's just called different things in different places. So a lot of times learning the terminology of, well, what does this industry call that particular skill can be important. But if you know where you want to go, if you're sure that you want to go into industry, then yeah, I would focus your efforts on things that are going to be valuable there, and especially in the particular type of position that you're going to be looking for. Because as much as we would like to do everything, we can't. So you want to focus your efforts on, what's going to be most valuable first.
Sure, that makes sense. Just a quick question from someone who asks, as an early graduate student, this was asked during your section about self-reflection and writing down skills as well. Do you think it's useful to do that even as an early graduate student as well?
Oh, definitely. Because you forget from early graduate to late graduate, what you did and what you liked and what you didn't like. And things may change over time too. As you go experience something else, you may go, oh, you know what, that other thing I did, wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or oh yeah, it was really horrible. And now that I've seen what things can be like, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
So I am a big fan of writing things down and recording them, because like I say all the time, if I don't write it down, it might as well have not happened. So, and especially with, accomplishments and skills and things like that, you want to put those, keep those all in a list somewhere.
That
So
makes sense.
you'll have them and not lose them for later on.
Yeah, offhand, I probably can't name half of my accomplishments, so I think it's useful to start
Shame on you.
start that list. No, I've got to do it. I've learned
Yep.
from this webinar as well, so thank you.
Well, and
We
that's
have
what I said. It's always important, but it's never urgent.
right. We have a question. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but how easy or hard it is for international physics masters to land a job? Are you aware of the visa constraints? They
Yeah.
mentioned the OPT provision under the
Mhm.
F1 visa requires the job be directly related to one's major.
Yeah, so OPT is a great way to stay in this country a little bit longer if that's what you want to do. And what we've seen is that there are some companies that will hire people that need sponsorship and have visa issues, and they don't care at all. And there's other companies that will not even look at people who have visa sponsorship issues. And we cannot figure out what makes the difference. For a while, we thought it was, oh, the big companies, have the resources, and so they can help people with that, and the small companies don't, and that's not it. And it's not different industries. So that's especially where the networking can come in really handy. If you can talk to somebody at the company and say, hey, does your company hire people who need visa sponsorship? I think proving that a job is, directly related is, if you can be a little bit creative, I don't think that part is too hard.
Sure.
It's more a matter of finding a company that's willing to work with you. And there are great resources out there on that particular issue. Unfortunately, that's one of those, it may be, I need a company that will help me with my visa sponsorship issues. And that may be the one thing that you get as a need, and everything else has to be a little bit more flexible.
Right on. That makes sense. So we had two questions with a very kind of similar premise, and I'll try and summarize them. Basically, both of these questions sort of ask, they've heard that the private sector or private sector jobs view people who have postdocs for too long as less desirable. In your experience, do you think there's a bias against long-time academics in the private sector?
what's the politically correct way to say sadly, maybe yes? Um, so there's a couple things. If it's somebody who's been in a serial postdocs for a very long time, people in academia will look at you and say, well, obviously you wanted to be an academician, but you couldn't make it. And so you're, just doing this because you can't make it in academia anymore. So what you really have to do is, convince them, no, I'm not going into industry just because there was nothing else, but I'm really excited about this kind of job. And, this is really what I want to do. And I just didn't know that this was an option before that, or, whatever the situation is. There's nothing wrong, certainly with doing a postdoc or even a couple of postdocs. But if you start getting, too many, it's like, okay, well, what was your plan?
Sure.
And it becomes a problem in academia because after, I want to say it's like 6 or 8 years, you start of postdocs, you start being ineligible for some of the startup grant funding. So you become less desirable for academic positions as well.
That makes sense.
So postdoc, yeah, we encourage people not to do a whole lot of postdocs. If you want to do a postdoc, have a specific reason, a specific thing you're going to get out of it. So maybe some new field you're going to learn, some new skill you're going to acquire, but make sure you know where you're going, and it's not just, I don't know what to do next, I guess I'll do a postdoc.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Next, we have kind of a more general question. And you touched on this, but one person asks, do you have any suggestions on how to get noticed by more employers on LinkedIn?
It's interesting. I heard from several different hiring companies recently, and one of the things they will look at, obviously industry, LinkedIn is one of the first places they go when they're looking to hire people. And I didn't realize they will actually look to see if you follow their company, and they will look to see for how long you have been following their company on LinkedIn.
Interesting.
Yeah. It never occurred to me that
Yeah,
that
no,
was
I
data
wouldn't
that
have
they
thought of
were
that.
using. So as I said, start early, start finding companies that you're like, hey, this is a cool company, I might like to work there someday. Obviously you don't want to follow hundreds,
Sure.
but follow them on LinkedIn, comment when they post something, and you can start, developing relationships, and they will notice you.
That makes sense. That's good info. I didn't realize that either.
Who knew?
Yeah, the industry secrets right here. We've got another question coming in from someone who's a working physicist with a master's. They say, although I'm in a field where a PhD is not an absolute requirement, I've been feeling like PhDs are much preferred. Would you recommend people going for PhDs just to improve academic skills and help job security?
Oh, I don't want people to do PhDs unless they want to. We have seen it's kind of the equivalent of grade inflation. So jobs that used to require a bachelor's, they're now requiring a master's, and jobs that used to require a master's, they're now requiring a PhD, just because more people were going and getting the degrees so they could get the higher degrees for not that much higher salaries. It's really going to depend on your field, but if you're seeing, and obviously, talk to your supervisor and other people in your field and say, is this holding me back? Is the fact that I don't have a PhD, going to stop me from getting ahead in my given career?
Sure.
So yeah, it depends too. If you've got a master's, will your company pay for the PhD? Are you going to have to, take time off and take out
Good
lots of
question,
loans?
for
There's
sure.
lots of things, yeah, that go into that decision. I know for an MBA, only one earned very early in your career from one of the top schools ever actually pays off financially.
Good to
So
know.
there's lots of different things to look at. I mean, if you just want people to have to call you doctor, then, go for it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We have a question that's just a short one, but I think a pretty practical one. The pandemic has cut off access to a lot of labs, making it difficult to gain practical skills. Do you have any suggestions or about how to do this?
Um, Yeah, this is where that creativity is coming into play, and trying to do as much as you can. I'm not suggesting setting up a home lab. That's, yeah, there's safety considerations and other things. I've been really impressed at how much we've been able to do remotely, or been able to do, only going in occasionally, or setting up, times so that people aren't in the lab at the same time. I think we're starting to see things open up. And I think people are going to be pretty understanding that, yeah, kind of everybody's just lost a year for a lot of things. So yeah, trying to figure out how much you can do at home. I've seen a lot of people do things like, writing review papers, um, anything that you can do to keep learning and keep going intellectually during this time is useful. But yeah, hands-on, there's some things that you just can't do at home.
Right, that makes sense. Let's see. So I think we have time for a few more questions. Um, there was one question that I think is also sort of more general. Someone asked, what is typically needed in the way of recommendations or references? How
Hmm.
many is typical, and is it usually, the letters or just contact info to the people, and how
Yeah.
heavily are these references weighted?
So in industry, it's 3. They
Mhm.
want names of 3 people. Somebody who knows you well is better than somebody who is well known. So you want somebody who can talk about your skills. Generally, it has to be, if you're in school, it has to be your current advisor. And it's best if there's like 2 people who are, in your department, maybe supervisors, and then 1 from some other area. So maybe somebody that you work with in a volunteer organization, or a collaborator who's at a different school, or somebody who's, kind of a little bit more removed. But most of the time in industry, you will just provide the contact information for those people. And then the company will usually either call or email them, um, and ask. And again, depending on the type of position, they may do that before they call you for an interview, or it may not be until the end of the process when they're ready to hire you.
Right, that makes sense. It
But
looks like oh, sorry.
so I was just gonna say, especially if you're looking to change careers and go into a different field, you want to make sure to tell your references that, because there's nothing worse than calling a reference and saying, yeah, Susie's applied for this job, tell me about them. And they'll say, oh yeah, she does, great organic synthesis, and she's wonderful in the lab, and on and on and on. And you're like, oh, okay, well, the position she applied for was as a journal editor, so thanks.
Sure.
So, give them a heads up as to what they should talk about with
Right.
you. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, you're fine. It looks like we have time basically for one more question, um, because I think we're ending at 2 sharp, or essentially. Do you have any advice for how to become a consultant for scientific writing, editing, or presenting? Is it
Oh,
advisable to take writing classes or get formal certificates, or can PhDs kind of just weigh in?
we argue about this on a regular basis, whether you need the writing classes. The first question I always ask people is, has anybody ever told you that you write well? And do other people bring you papers and ask you to help write them and help edit them? If nobody's ever asked you for help, you might want to
Might be
think
a
about this.
sign.
Yeah, it might be a sign. All scientists think they can write well. Um, it's actually a great thing to start on the side. There's lots of freelance opportunities. So you can check out, there's the American Medical Writers Association, the Society for Technical Communication. Um, all kinds of places have things. And so it's a great career where you can try a little bit, do a few jobs on the side, see how you like it, see how good you are at it, see how fast you are if you're getting paid, by the hour or by the project. Um, and try it and see if you like it. But yeah, tech writing and tech editing is certainly something that a lot of PhDs just go straight into without any education in that area, because we do so much of it just as part of getting the degree. but having a portfolio of pieces that you can show potential clients is really valuable. So
That makes
it's
sense.
having the pieces more than having a class would be helpful.
Sure. So I believe that is all the time we have in terms of questions. There are a couple others. It's possible we might be able to answer them at a later time. I appreciate everyone's involvement. Lisa, thank you for coming on and leading us through this extremely useful presentation. I learned a bunch. And again, folks who are listening and watching, at the end, after the end of the webinar, you will be directed to a survey, as well as it will be emailed to you. We really appreciate any feedback, stuff that you liked, stuff that you need more of, subjects that we should cover. We want to bring these webinars from the Career Network. We produce them specifically for the viewers. So any subjects that you're interested in, that's the direct, fastest way to let us know that we can make more webinars and more information to bring to you. Yeah, I think that's it for me.